My name is Ethan, and this happened during my first month working the night shift for a small medical supply company in Ohio. My job was simple. Every night between midnight and 5 in the morning, I drove a refrigerated delivery van to different hospitals and clinics. Most of the time, the roads were empty, and the deliveries were routine. I actually enjoyed the silence. That changed on a rainy Thursday in October. Around 2:15 a.m., my dispatcher called me. There was a last-minute order, she said. It's only one package. The location is about 30 minutes outside the city. She texted me the address. I noticed something strange immediately. There wasn't a hospital name, just an address in the middle of nowhere. I figured maybe it was a private clinic. The GPS led me farther away from civilization than I'd ever been before. Streetlights disappeared. Cell service dropped to 1 bar. Eventually, I turned onto a narrow gravel road surrounded by dense forest. After another 5 minutes, I saw an old brick building. No signs, no lights except one dim porch light. It looked abandoned. I checked the paperwork again. Same address. I grabbed the insulated medical package and walked toward the entrance. Before I could knock, the door slowly opened. An elderly man stood there wearing what looked like an old hospital uniform. He didn't smile. He didn't even say hello. He simply pointed inside. I asked, "Medical delivery?" He nodded once. The hallway behind him was unbelievably dark. The air smelled like mold and bleach. As I followed him inside, I noticed something odd. There were hospital beds lining the hallway, old wheelchairs, rusted IV stands. Everything looked like it hadn't been used in decades. The man stopped outside room 14. He pointed at the door. I placed the package on the floor. "Need a signature?" I asked. He slowly shook his head. Then he whispered, "Don't stay after 3. Before I could ask what he meant, he walked away into the darkness. I left immediately, or at least I tried to. When I reached the parking lot, my van was gone. At first I thought someone had stolen it, but the keys were still in my hand. I looked around. Nothing. The parking lot was completely empty. That's when I heard an engine start somewhere behind the building. I walked around the corner. There was my van, parked behind the building. The engine was running. The driver's door was open. I was absolutely certain I hadn't parked it there. As I got closer, I froze. Someone was sitting in the driver's seat. Their back was facing me. I assumed it was a thief. I shouted, "Hey!" No response. I walked closer. The person slowly turned their head. It wasn't a person. Its face looked gray. Its eyes were completely black. And it was smiling, not a normal smile, way too wide. I couldn't move. Then the radio inside my van turned on by itself. Static filled the air. A woman's voice whispered, "Leave." The thing in the driver's seat disappeared. It didn't climb out. It didn't duck down. It simply wasn't there anymore. I jumped inside, locked the doors, and drove away faster than I ever have in my life. As I reached the end of the gravel road, my phone suddenly regained service. 3 missed calls from dispatch. I called back immediately. She sounded panicked. "Ethan, where are you? I just finished the delivery." There was silence. Then she asked, "What delivery?" I reminded her about the emergency package. She became quiet again. Finally, she said, "I never sent you anywhere tonight." My stomach dropped. I checked the text message she'd supposedly sent. It was gone. The address had vanished. Every message after midnight had disappeared from my phone. The next morning, I drove back with 2 coworkers. There was no building, no gravel road, just dense woods. I thought maybe I'd taken the wrong turn, so I searched satellite maps. Nothing. A week later, I mentioned the story to an older driver who had worked there for nearly 20 years. He looked uncomfortable. Then he asked me one question. "Did the old man tell you not to stay after 3? I nodded. He stood up without saying another word. The following day, he brought me an old newspaper clipping from 1989. It showed a private medical facility that had burned to the ground after an electrical fire. 14 patients died. The article listed every room that was affected first. Room 14 was at the top of the list. I quit the night shift 2 weeks later. I never drove deliveries after midnight again. But every October, at exactly 2:15 a.m., my phone lights up with a notification. No sender, no number, just one message. Your final delivery is waiting. If a house ever seems too good to be true, too cheap, too fast, with someone practically begging you to move in right away, don't take it. I made that mistake, and to this day, every single night, at exactly 3:17 a.m., my eyes snap open on their own. No alarm, no sound, just awake. This story is based on true events. Names have been changed. My name is Arjun. 2 years ago, I was living an ordinary life, a modest job, a rented apartment, and a quiet dream of owning an old house somewhere far from the noise of the city. When I finally found that house, it felt like luck had turned in my favor. 3 rooms, weathered but solid, and priced at almost half of what anything comparable was going for. The agent barely blinked when he said it. It's a good house, just a little old. The previous owners needed to sell fast. I didn't push for details. Looking back, that's exactly where everything went wrong. The house sat on the edge of the village, shadowed by an old banyan tree with roots thick enough to trip on. Only 2 or 3 homes stood nearby. The rest was just open fields stretching into the dark. The night I arrived with my bags, an elderly woman from across the road stopped mid-step and stared at me. She didn't say a word. She just shook her head slowly and disappeared back into her house, the door shutting a little too quickly behind her. At the time, I brushed it off as nothing. By the time I'd unpacked, it was already past 10. I was exhausted, so I didn't think twice before collapsing onto the bed. Sleep came fast, but somewhere in the dead of night, I woke to a sound, footsteps coming from the floor above me. I went completely still. I was alone in that house. The upstairs floor, a space I hadn't even set foot in yet, let alone moved anything into, was producing the unmistakable sound of someone walking, slow, deliberate, the kind of pace someone uses when they're trying not to be heard. I grabbed my phone, switched on the flashlight, and stared up toward the staircase. The sound stopped instantly. I told myself it was an old house. Wooden floors settle. Wind gets into the cracks. I lay back down, trying to believe it, but sleep never came back that night. Every time my eyes started to close, the footsteps picked up again. Patient, unhurried, like they had all the time in the world. The next morning, I walked through the entire house in daylight, trying to shake off the unease. There was only 1 room upstairs and it was locked. The agent said he'd bring the key later, but as I passed the door, something caught my eye. Scratches carved into the wood, 5 long lines running from top to bottom, deep enough to have taken effort, and they were on the inside of the door. A cold prickle crawled up the back of my neck. I snapped a photo, telling myself I'd bring it up with the agent when he came by. That evening, I stopped at the small shop down the road for supplies. The moment the shopkeeper heard which house I'd moved into, his expression shifted. The easy smile drained right off his face. "Sir," he said, lowering his voice like the walls might be listening, "the family that lived there before you, they vanished. One night, gone, left everything behind, furniture, clothes, everything. Police searched, found nothing. People around here only say one thing about that house: never go near the upstairs room after dark." I laughed it off on the walk home, but something had already lodged itself under my skin, and it wasn't going away. The next few days were quiet, almost suspiciously quiet. I convinced myself it had all been nerves, the kind of jitters that come with sleeping somewhere unfamiliar. Then the fourth night arrived, and everything changed. It was around 1 in the morning when I felt it, the unmistakable sense that someone was standing just outside my bedroom door. A shadow shifted beneath the gap at the bottom. I lay frozen, barely breathing, my eyes fixed on that thin strip of darkness. Then came a voice, faint, almost a breath, a woman's voice, whispering my name like she'd known me my whole life. Arjun, Arjun. Every muscle in my body locked up. I squeezed my eyes shut, my pulse hammering so loud I was sure it could be heard through the door. Minutes passed. Eventually, the voice faded. When I finally forced myself to open the door, the hallway was empty. But on the floor, right at my threshold, were small footprints, wet, muddy, bare feet, as if someone had walked in straight from soaked earth outside. There was no mud anywhere else in that house, not a single trace. I decided I needed answers. I called the agent and asked him to bring the key to the upstairs room. No more excuses. It took 2 days. When he finally handed it over, he wouldn't meet my eyes. "Sir, why does it matter? The rest of the house is fine. Just leave that room alone." I didn't budge. Eventually, he gave in, dropping the key into my palm like it burned. That evening I climbed the stairs. My hand was trembling as I turned the key in the lock. Inside was a small room thick with dust, heavy curtains blocking out every trace of light, the air stale and cold in a way that had nothing to do with the weather. In the center of the room stood an old wooden cupboard. On the wall behind it, someone had drawn a large circle in charcoal, filled with strange symbols, something between an old script and a warning. I opened the cupboard and found a handful of children's toys, a worn leather diary, and a photograph. A family, a woman, a man, 2 young children. Someone had taken black ink and drawn a violent cross over the woman's face. I picked up the diary and carried it back downstairs, needing distance from that room before I could even open it. The diary belonged to the woman who'd lived here before me. The early entries were unremarkable. Grocery lists, the kids' school updates, small complaints about the heat. But the final 10 pages told a different story. The handwriting grew erratic, rushed, the pen pressed so hard in places it tore through the paper. She'd written that something came down from the upstairs room every night, that her husband insisted it was all in her head, until the children started waking up in tears, insisting someone was calling them to come inside. The last entry was short, just a few lines, scrawled fast. "Tonight we're leaving this house for good. Whatever lives in that upstairs room, it wants one of us to stay behind. If this diary ever reaches someone else, do not go into that room. And if you've already gone in, it's already too late for you." I shut the diary. My hands had gone ice cold. That's when I heard it again. From upstairs, the same footsteps, slow, but this time they were moving toward the staircase. I should have run right then. I knew it, but fear had wrapped itself around my legs, rooting me to the floor. The footsteps reached the bottom of the stairs and stopped. A few seconds of dead silence. Then, slowly, the door latch began to twist on its own. I killed the light and dropped behind the sofa. Phone pressed silent against my chest. The door creaked open. Something stepped inside. Footsteps so light they barely registered, as if whatever it was didn't fully touch the ground. The room's temperature dropped in an instant. I watched my own breath curl in the air in front of me. Then the voice returned. The same woman, much closer now. "Arjun, you read the diary, didn't you? So, you understand now? No one leaves this place." I clenched my eyes shut, too terrified to so much as breathe wrong. Silence stretched on, unbearable. Then slowly the footsteps retreated, back toward the stairs, back toward that room. The second the silence felt complete, I moved. I grabbed my keys, my phone, sprinted for the front door, and didn't look back once. I never returned to that house. Everything I owned is still sitting inside it, exactly where I left it. A month later, I heard the house is still standing empty. The agent tried listing it again. No one in the village will go near it, not even to look. I'm back in the city now, safe. Or at least that's what I tell myself. But one thing never changed. Every single night, at exactly 3:17 a.m., my eyes open on their own, and sometimes, faint but unmistakable, I hear footsteps on a staircase, even though my current apartment doesn't have an upstairs at all. So if a house ever comes to you too cheap, too fast, ask one question before you sign anything. Ask where the last owner really went. If this story got under your skin, let me know in the comments. Has anything like this ever happened to you? Subscribe, because the next story is already waiting. And before you turn off your lights tonight, maybe double check that your door is actually locked. If this story got under your skin, let me know in the comments. Has anything like this ever happened to you? Subscribe, because the next story is already waiting. And before you turn off your lights tonight, maybe double check that your door is actually locked.